So many are now basically what you're watching in Europe. For the longest, many of these liberalized white men would espouse, the future is female, and this is what a male feminist looks like. And for many of these individuals, within a very short time period, they're being bred out. And this is why I've said, for a lot of people who are worried about the state of the way the country is going, or you're seeing all these people promoting, whether it's alternative lifestyles, as they say, that gets bred out very quickly. It doesn't take many generations. That's why these people go for your kids. That's why they sit there and they chant, "We're coming for your children." That's why they sit here and they try to get into your schools, because they know themselves the only way that they can, in essence, procreate is via propaganda. And they have to mislead the public into giving away their children into this sort of a lifestyle. Many of these people come from abused homes. Many of them have multiple mental illnesses, whether it's depression, bipolar, anxiety, PTSD, whatever it is. They always come into the hospital, and the they, thems, and the we are legion people, right? These people often come into the hospital under the harshest of conditions. These are not people that are well mentally, physically, or spiritually. And so when you see this, you just let these people be. Their lifestyle will weed them out, right? But what you should be doing, and what men should have always been focusing on, is independence, buying land, having skills, creating jobs, staying away from socialism. But for many people, this is the route that much of the country has gone. And it doesn't take many generations for this to sort of, as they say, show itself. And so it manifests itself in low birth rates. That low birth rate causes inflation, because now the people become less productive, which means the money becomes worth less, because to stimulate these economies to grow, they have to print money. Whereas for economies to grow, either the people become more productive or the amount of people grow, and you get more out of your economy because you have more people, or the people become more productive. When you print money and when you go into debt, you get less productivity. The value of the money becomes worth less, and so you end up with inflation and more people chanting, we want free shit. This is what is going on in France. For people complaining about, you invite the third world, you become the third world, or that the government is pushing on all these Muslims, the reality is it is the people. The people are socialists, and so the people want free shit. Macron said we cannot afford to retire people at 59. And this is what the whole rioting began. The rioting in France began with people complaining, we want free shit. We want to retire at 59. And Macron is saying we cannot afford to retire all of these people by 59. Will cause inflation. Let's just look at America. You've got 70 million baby boomers in America that by the year 2030 will be age 65 and older. They will be spending less and requiring more in terms of healthcare, which will strain the system. We already have a shortage of nurses everywhere I go. I'm on the West Coast, from the East Coast to the West Coast. Everywhere you go, there are shortages of nurses, shortages of aides, shortages of techs, respiratory therapists, doctors. No matter where you go, there are not enough people to care for the amount of elderly that are going to be coming into the system within the next decade. And so what is the government to do with the people who are socialists? And this is what many people don't understand. Yes, it might have been propagandized to the people, but the later generations, as the Bidens of the world are now old and gray, how are they going to set up to give the people what they demand? What happens when you don't give the people what they demand? You get France. And so people see this. This is why the West has been propagandizing second and third world countries to stay away from natural gas or oil under the guise of we need to save the planet. It's because they want to slow down their industrialization, as those second and third world countries now become second and perhaps first world, like for example, in places like in China and in Russia, where they're able to exist outside of the influence of the United States. Perfect example is look what happened to Russia. America thought that they were swinging a big dick and that they could box out Russia, and that did not happen. And overwhelmingly, it was because Germany and the European governments were cozying up to Russia, and they were getting a lot of their energy. 80% of all of their energy was coming from Russia, and America did not like that because Europe is in essence a vassal to the United States along with other regions. And so they were getting too cozy with Russia and talking all this shit about taking down the dollar, or that the dollar was not going to be. This is what Klaus Schwab was talking about. Klaus Schwab and what's his name? Soros. They were all talking about this, how the dollar would no longer be this impactful. That maybe there will be other currencies. And of course, the IMF was working towards that. They just recently came out with a new digital asset. And that's what they're going to use for international settlements. So you have multiple people trying to compete, other people thinking we can rival America on the out, and of course America is sitting here thinking shit is sweet, that everything is as it was, and that is not the case. And Americans demand more. Americans want their, the next generations want their bills paid for. They want free housing. They want increases to Medicare and Medicaid. They want their insulin paid for. They want their student loan paid for. They want child tax credits. They want this and they want that. And the government is like, well, the only thing that they can do is cause inflation. All they can do is print money. Scare the shit out of me. Somebody's banging something. All they can do is print money and cause inflation, and hope that many of these other second and third world countries fall into poverty so that America can get cheap labor. This is what many of these countries are fighting for. It is global socialism, and they're running out of cheap labor is the problem. As all the industrialization has left many of these first world countries, everything is going overseas. And so these people overseas are starting to grow. Look at China. China is a perfect example. What was a once poor nation, a third world country, is now the producer for the world. And so how do you go to war with the countries that produce all the stuff that you need to buy and who buy your debt? This is where the West is. And so hence, you will own nothing and be happy is what Europe says. They see the scene of the world changing, and they realize we need to propagandize the people to live with less. The people don't want to live with less. Look at France. This is what the French are saying. The UK said the exact same thing. I forget, it was one of the politicians, because the people kept asking for wage increases to keep up with inflation. And he literally said, you're just going to have to realize that you are poor and you'll have to accept it. And of course, people didn't like when he said that shit, because they're socialists and they want free stuff. They're not out there looking to work hard. Do you think Americans are going to go pick the fields for low wages? No, they'll demand what they refer to as a living wage. We need a living wage. What is that going to do? It forces the government to pull in cheap labor from abroad. These people will work for less. It will be better than the standard that they have in the country that they're coming from, and it will at the same time give Americans access to cheaper produce, because these people will get paid less. They'll send that money back home, and then eventually they'll go back when it all comes to an end. But this is the problem. People look at it as, oh, these people are tyrants. The French are looking at Macron, because Macron wanted 5 years added to retirement. He added 2, and the people lost their shit, and started burning down buildings. And then of course the Muslims that are moving into the country, which are now a bigger representation because they're at least 10% of the population, and they're seeing all of these weak men and the immorality. And these are religious men who are not weak. They have grown up in the hard times. They're not the weak men that have been coddled for decades. And so they too want a piece of the good times, and they're willing to fight for it. And so the men who have grown up in the hard times will push out the weak men. And this is what will continually happen, bit by bit, as time goes by. You have weak American white liberal men in America who can't control the women. Women will always vote a country into poverty because women are dependent. Women are dependent, and they'll either be dependent upon you as the husband, or they'll be collectively dependent, and they'll continue to vote for welfare. Whereas the individual man, the husband, can control the woman's spending. Whereas collectively, because most of the men are weak, they cannot. And so the government prints money, provides welfare jobs, either via government jobs or via corporate welfare. This is why the government pushes for diversity hires. So it's all corporate welfare. They're all welfare jobs. When that goes away, just look at Argentina. When all the welfare went away, because Argentina lacked production, they had a 60% unemployment rate. That is what you'll see in many of these Western countries as time goes by, and the government knows this. This is why they push the propaganda of we need to take your guns away, we need sensible laws, etc., because they know what the outcome will be. The outcome will be that when the welfare goes away, the people will become violent. Look at France. Just look at France. France is a perfect example. That's why they need to take away your. That's why they need to take away your guns. That's why they want to introduce central bank digital currency so they can program that shit. But it ain't gonna work. Look at France. When the people realize that the government starts hindering their ability to get the stuff that they need, the people will become violent. It's not like China, where the people can't fight back, or where the people don't have the desire to fight back when everything goes to shit. Just look at France, right? There's no guns in France, but yet look at the people, look at the French. More importantly, somehow guns will come into the country. Look at France. When it all goes to shit, someone will be there to sell these people guns. Just look what happened in America, right? When the French helped the United States breaking away from Great Britain. The French were selling weapons to America. It is what it is. Someone will take advantage of the scenario to make a buck. Just like in France. Someone is bringing in guns to the country with all these gun laws that they have in France, but yet here they are fighting. They're literally fighting. There was videos of people, common citizens that look like perhaps either Middle Eastern or African men with fucking sniper rifles on the roof. This is the inevitability of what happens as the good times go away. The men who have lived in hard times, and they become harder, right? Because now the West is experiencing hard times, which makes it even harder for other countries. These men end up coming into the country as this country and the West are not having children. Just look at America. Borders wide the fuck open. Border wide open. All the people coming in from the South, come on in. There's videos of the Border Patrol snipping the Texas barbed wire. Texans put the governor put out barbed wire because the federal government didn't want to do anything, and the Border Patrol comes by snipping the wire. Come on in, right? Just like they did on January 16th, right? They let all those people come on in, like they're in the fucking tour, going right in through the velvet ropes. Come on in, enjoy your stay. It is what it is. This is what socialism looked like. As the people choose not to have children because things become too expensive because of inflation and because of lack of productivity, this is what you get. This is why you don't hear the Americans complaining about the government needs to stop printing money. When the government sends money to all these other countries, like for example in Ukraine, the people don't say we need to stop printing money. What they say is, hey, that money should be used for us, right? Kind of like Judas, when that woman came in and the lady took a nice bottle of oil, and the Bible says that she began to put that on Jesus's feet, and in essence preparing him for burial while he was yet alive. And of course, Judas said, hey, why this waste? We could have sold that and given it to the poor, like me. And it's all hypocrisy, and this is what the American people do. They complain when money goes to somebody else. Oh, those are my taxes, even though the vast majority of Americans don't even pay. federal taxes. Over 60% of Americans don't even pay taxes. They get more from the system than they put into the system. And they pretend, hey, why this waste? We could give that to the poor. And yet Americans are some of the richest people, even the poorest of Americans. This is, what's his name? Charlie Munger. I'm forgetting his name, but in any event. And he said, for the first time in history, we see the poorest people are the fattest people. And that's where their wealth goes. For a lot of these poor, lower class individuals, their God has become their belly. And that's where their wealth goes. They put all their wealth into their stomach, into consuming. It is what it is. This is the state of many of these Western countries, and it will only continue to get worse. And the politicians know it. The politicians know it, and they're going to do everything to hold on to that power. Because if they don't, in the midst of the chaos, people will be put to death, and a new regime will rise. And that's why they constantly refer to the right as, right, the funny mustache people, right? You're a Yahtzee. Because what they're doing is going to bring about that. Well, TFM said it best. You cannot create you cannot create, in essence, Weimar Germany, or setting the stage for Weimar Germany, and not expect to get a Hitler. And that's what they fear. They're going to bring. That's why there's so many pictures of Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump is a socialist, but he's a socialist from yesterday. He is not a socialist of today. That's the difference. Even though people think he's on the right, the right are yesterday's socialists, are yesterday's Democrats. Donald Trump has always been a Democrat. Many of the people who are quote unquote on the right have been Democrats for a long time, but they were yesterday's Democrats. They're not today's Democrats. They're not far left. They're left or middle left versus the far left that we have today. But it all goes away. It all goes away. As time goes by and the system continues to grind, the weak men create hard times, and the hard times cull the weak men. And they make room for the strong men who will bring about the new age of the good times. Just be there to see it. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.